You know that feeling when you think you've escaped your worst nightmare, only to discover it was just the beginning? Well, let me tell you about Marcus, the man who turned my life into a living hell for 2 years, until karma served him the most delicious slice of revenge he never saw coming. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Priya, and 3 years ago, I thought I'd found my forever person. Marcus was charming, successful, and had this way of making me feel like I was the only woman in the world. For 8 months, we were inseparable. He'd surprise me, with flowers at work, cook elaborate dinners, and talk about our future like it was already written in stone. But fairy tales don't exist, do they? The cracks started showing when I got promoted to senior marketing coordinator at my firm. Suddenly, Marcus wasn't celebrating my success. He was questioning it. "Are you sure you're not working too much?" became, "Who's this Daniel guy you keep mentioning?" Which escalated to, "I don't think you should go to that work dinner." The night I realized I needed to run was when I found him going through my phone while I was in the shower. Not just scrolling, actually taking screenshots of my conversations with male colleagues. When I confronted him, he didn't even try to deny it. "I'm protecting us, Priya. You're too trusting. These guys, they don't want friendship. They want more." That's when I knew. This wasn't love. It was possession. Breaking up with Marcus was like trying to escape quicksand. The more I struggled, the deeper he pulled me in. He showed up at my apartment at midnight, claiming he just needed to talk. He sent 37 text messages in one day, ranging from desperate apologies to vague threats about what would happen if I threw away what we had. Then came the flowers, dozens of them, at my office, my apartment building, even at my favorite coffee shop. The delivery drivers looked at me with pity. They thought it was romantic. I saw it for what it was. A reminder that he was always watching. The stalking escalated over months. He'd appear at restaurants where I was having dinner with friends, claiming it was a coincidence. He somehow knew when I changed my hair appointment, when I went grocery shopping, when I took different routes to work. My life became a chess game where I was always 3 moves behind. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The breaking point came on a rainy Thursday evening. I was walking home from the gym when I spotted him sitting in his car across from my building, again. But this time, something was different. He wasn't just watching. He was writing, taking notes. I marched over and banged on his window, my fear temporarily overwhelmed by rage. "What the hell are you writing about me, Marcus?" He rolled down the window with that same smile that used to make my heart skip. Now it made my skin crawl. "Just keeping track, babe. Making sure you're safe. You've been making some interesting choices lately." Interesting choices? Like living my life without you in it? Like dating that investment banker you met at Sarah's party last weekend? My blood ran cold. I hadn't told anyone about David except Sarah. And even then, it was barely more than a casual mention. How did he know? "Stay away from me, Marcus. I'm serious this time. I'll call the police." He laughed, actually laughed. "And tell them what? That your ex-boyfriend is concerned about your well-being? That he's making sure you're not making mistakes that could hurt your future?" That night, I did call the police. The officer was sympathetic but honest. Marcus hadn't technically broken any laws. Following me in public spaces, sending flowers, showing up at the same places, it was all legally gray area unless he explicitly threatened me or violated a restraining order. "Has he threatened physical harm?" the officer asked. "Not directly, but has he damaged your property or entered your home uninvited?" "No, but he's—" "Ma'am, I understand this is frustrating, but unless he crosses those lines, our hands are tied." I was trapped in a nightmare where the monster was too smart to get caught. For 6 more months, Marcus haunted my life like a ghost with a GPS tracker. I changed my phone number twice, moved apartments, even switched gyms. Nothing worked. He found me every time, always with that same excuse, coincidence. Then, like a miracle I didn't see coming, he disappeared. No more flowers. No more surprise appearances. No more feeling like I was being watched every second of every day. For 3 weeks, I barely dared to breathe, waiting for the other shoe to drop. When it didn't, I finally started to believe I was free. That's when I met Richard. Richard wasn't like the guys I usually dated. He was older, established, with silver threading through his dark hair and the kind of confidence that comes from building something meaningful. He owned a successful tech consulting firm, drove a Tesla, and had this amazing penthouse downtown, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. More importantly, he made me feel safe. For the first time in almost 2 years, I could go to dinner without checking over my shoulder. I could sleep without jumping at every sound in the hallway. 6 months later, Richard proposed. Not with some elaborate public display, but quietly, over breakfast on his balcony, while we watched the sunrise paint the city gold. "I know we haven't been together long," he said, sliding a vintage emerald ring across the table. "But some things you just know. I want to spend whatever time I have left making sure you never feel unsafe again." I said yes before he finished the sentence. Our wedding was small, just close friends and family. I wore my grandmother's sari. Richard looked distinguished in his navy suit, and for the first time in years, I felt like I could finally breathe. That night, as we slow danced in our living room to jazz music playing softly from Richard's old record player, I thought my story was finally getting its happy ending. I had no idea the real story was just beginning. The Monday after our honeymoon, Richard asked if I wanted to come to his office to meet some of his key employees. "I want to show off my beautiful wife," he said, straightening his tie in the mirror. I was nervous, but excited. This was my new life, my fresh start, my chance to be part of something Richard had built from nothing. We walked into the sleek glass building, past the modern furniture and motivational artwork, toward the conference room where his management team was waiting. Richard opened the door with a proud smile. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet my wife, Priya." And that's when I saw him. Sitting at the polished conference table, wearing a crisp white shirt and that same smile that used to haunt my dreams, was Marcus, my stalker, my nightmare, my husband's employee. The room spun. My hands went numb. Marcus's eyes locked onto mine with a look I couldn't quite read. Surprise? Satisfaction? Fear? "Oh my God," I whispered, gripping Richard's arm so tightly I probably bruised him. "Priya? Are you okay?" Richard's concerned. Voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. Marcus stood slowly, extending his hand like we were meeting for the first time. "It's so nice to meet you, Mrs. Henderson. I'm Marcus Thompson, head of client relations." His voice was steady, professional, but his eyes were telling a completely different story. Richard beamed, oblivious to the silent war happening in his conference room. "Marcus is one of my best employees. Been with the company for 8 months now. Fantastic work ethic." 8 months. The same 8 months I'd been dating Richard. The same 8 months Marcus had mysteriously disappeared from my life. He hadn't given up. He'd been planning. My ex used to stalk me. Until I became his boss's wife. Part 2, the handshake. Lasted exactly 3 seconds too long. Marcus's palm was sweaty, his grip firm enough to send a message without Richard noticing. When he finally let go, I could still feel the phantom pressure of his fingers, like a ghost trying to drag me back into hell. "Priya works in marketing too," Richard said proudly, his arm around my waist anchoring me to reality. "Different industry, but I keep telling her we could use someone with her expertise here." Marcus tilted his head with mock interest. "Really? What kind of marketing do you do, Priya?" The way he said my name made my skin crawl, like he was tasting a secret. Digital campaigns mostly, I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. Brand strategy, consumer psychology. Consumer psychology, Marcus repeated slowly. That's fascinating. Understanding what makes people tick, what drives their decisions, what they really want versus what they think they want. Every word was loaded with meaning only I could decode. Richard laughed. Marcus here is great with clients, has this uncanny ability to anticipate their needs, sometimes before they even know what they need themselves. I bet he does. The meeting continued around me like a fever dream. Richard introduced me to other employees, Sarah from accounting, David from IT, Jennifer from project management. Normal people with normal jobs who had no idea they were working alongside a predator. But Marcus never took his eyes off me, not once. When we finally left the office, Richard was practically glowing. They loved you. I could tell. Marcus especially seemed impressed. He kept asking about your background. Did he? My voice sounded hollow in my own ears. You know what? I think I'm going to take you up on that suggestion about bringing you on board. We could use a marketing director, and who better than my brilliant wife? My stomach dropped. Richard, I already have a job. A job you hate. You complain about your boss constantly, and the pay is terrible. Here, you'd be working with me, making twice what you make now and actually using your talents. He wasn't wrong about my current job, but the thought of seeing Marcus every day made me want to vomit. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling while Richard slept peacefully beside me. How had Marcus found his way into my husband's company? It couldn't be a coincidence, not after 2 years of calculated stalking. I grabbed my laptop and did what I should have done months ago. I investigated. Marcus Thompson, head of client relations at Henderson Tech Solutions. Started 8 months ago with glowing references from his previous company, Meridian Consulting. Graduated summa cum laude from Northwestern. Clean social media presence, professional headshots, the perfect corporate resume. But I knew how to dig deeper. A reverse image search on his professional headshot led me to an older LinkedIn profile under a slightly different name. Marcus T. Anderson. Same face, same credentials, but this profile had been deleted 3 months ago. My blood ran cold. Then I found the real treasure. A cached version of a local business journal article from 18 months ago. Meridian Consulting faces harassment lawsuit, the headline read. The article was vague, citing inappropriate workplace conduct and an undisclosed settlement, but it mentioned that several female employees had filed complaints. Marcus hadn't just been stalking me. I wasn't his first victim. He was a professional predator who had somehow wormed his way into my new life. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The next morning, I made a decision that would change everything. Richard, I said over breakfast, I've been thinking about your offer. His face lit up like Christmas morning. Really, I want to accept. But I have some conditions. Anything. I want to start as a consultant first, feel things out before making it permanent, and I want to focus specifically on client relations. I think there's room for improvement in that department. Richard frowned slightly. Marcus does excellent work in client relations. Our retention rate is phenomenal. I'm sure he does. But every department can use fresh eyes, right? Maybe I could shadow him, learn the ropes, see where we might optimize. The beauty of manipulation is that men like Richard, good, trusting men, never see it coming. That's actually brilliant, he said slowly. A marketing perspective on client relations could revolutionize how we approach retention. Hook, line, and sinker. My first day at Henderson Tech Solutions, I dressed like armor. Sharp blazer, heels that made me 3 inches taller, and my grandmother's gold bangles for luck. I was walking into battle, and I intended to win. Marcus was waiting in the lobby when I arrived. "What a coincidence," he said with that snake oil smile. "Richard mentioned you'd be starting today. I thought I'd personally welcome you to the team." How thoughtful. I kept my voice pleasant, professional. "I'm looking forward to working closely with your department." Something flickered behind his eyes. Fear? Excitement? With Marcus, the two were often indistinguishable. "I've prepared a comprehensive overview of our current client strategies," he said, falling into step beside me as we walked toward the elevator. "I think you'll find our approach quite thorough." The elevator doors closed, trapping us in 6 feet of polished steel and suffocating tension. "You know, Priya," Marcus said quietly, "I have to admit, this is quite the unexpected turn of events." I kept my eyes fixed on the floor numbers. Life is full of surprises. It really is. Here I was, trying to move on with my life, build something new, and fate brings us back together. Makes you wonder if the universe has a sense of humor. Or justice, I said softly. The elevator dinged, and the doors opened before he could respond. Over. The next 2 weeks, I played the perfect corporate spouse. I attended meetings, took notes, asked intelligent questions, and slowly, methodically, began to gather intelligence. Marcus had been busy in his 8 months at Henderson Tech, not just with clients, but with female employees. I noticed how Sarah, from accounting, would tense up when he entered a room. How Jennifer from project management had requested to be moved to a different floor. How the young intern, Kelly, had suddenly quit without notice 3 weeks ago. I also noticed how meticulous Marcus was about documentation. Every client interaction, every email, every phone call was logged in obsessive detail. The same controlling behavior I remembered, now channeled into what looked like exceptional work ethic. But exceptional work ethic doesn't explain why 3 female employees had filed informal complaints with HR in the past 6 months. Complaints that had mysteriously been resolved internally without any formal action taken. Richard's company had a predator problem, and my husband had no idea. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The breakthrough came during my 3rd week when I was working late and decided to check the client database from Marcus's computer. He'd left it unlocked, a mistake that seemed uncharacteristic until I realized it wasn't a mistake at all. He wanted me to find what I found. Hidden in a folder labeled Client Research were dozens of files that had nothing to do with business. Photos of female employees taken without their knowledge, screenshots of their social media profiles, detailed notes about their schedules, their relationships, their personal lives, and there, in a subfolder labeled PM, was everything. Photos of me from 2 years ago, taken with a telephoto lens. Maps of my old apartment building, my gym, my favorite restaurants. Screenshots of every social media post I'd ever made. A detailed timeline of my relationship with Richard, complete with photos of us together that could only have been taken by someone following us. But the most chilling discovery was a document titled Phase 2 Implementation. It wasn't just a plan, it was a manifesto. Marcus had orchestrated everything. He'd researched Richard's company for months before applying. He'd learned Richard's patterns, his favorite coffee shop, his gym schedule. He'd positioned himself to accidentally meet Richard at a networking event, charmed his way into a job interview, and spent months becoming indispensable, all to get back to me. The document outlined his next steps in disturbing detail. How he planned to sabotage my marriage from the inside. How he would use his position to manipulate Richard against me. How he would slowly, systematically destroy my new life until I had nowhere to turn but back to him. The subject responds well to isolation and financial pressure. one section read. Previous behavioral patterns suggest she will seek stability over independence when sufficiently destabilized. I was reading my own psychological profile, written by the man who had spent 2 years studying me like a lab rat. But Marcus had made one crucial miscalculation. He thought I was still the same frightened woman who had run from him 2 years ago. He thought I was still the victim who had begged police for help, who had changed apartments and phone numbers and lived in constant fear. He had no idea who I'd become or what I was capable of. I carefully photographed every document, every image, every sick detail of his obsession. Then I closed the files, cleared the browser history, and sat back in his chair to think. Marcus wanted to play games? Fine. But this time, I would be writing the rules. I pulled out my phone and made 3 calls. The first was to a private investigator I'd found through my research into Marcus's past. The second was to an employment attorney who specialized in harassment cases. The third was to a friend from college who now worked for the FBI's Cyber C. Crimes Division. When I finished, I looked around the empty office, Marcus's kingdom, Richard's company, my new battlefield, and smiled for the first time in 3 weeks. Marcus thought he was the hunter. He was about to learn what it felt like to be prey. My ex used to stalk me until I became his boss's wife. Part 3. The private investigator's name was Detective Angela Martinez, and she had the kind of voice that suggested she'd seen everything twice. When I called her at 11 p.m. from Marcus's office, she didn't seem surprised by the hour or the urgency. Workplace stalking with escalation patterns, she said after I gave her the basics. How long do we have before he makes his next move? According to his timeline, he's planning to start Phase 3 next week. Something about marital destabilization through strategic professional sabotage. Jesus. Okay, here's what we're going to do. What we did was build a case that would make prosecutors weep with joy. Martinez had experience with predators like Marcus. She called them life infiltrators. Men who don't just stalk their victims, but systematically insert themselves into every aspect of their target's existence until escape becomes impossible. The good news, she told me during our meeting the next day, is that guys like this are compulsive documenters. They can't help themselves. They need to record every detail of their conquest because the planning is half the thrill. And the bad news? They're usually smart enough to stay just inside legal boundaries until they decide to escalate to violence. We need to move fast. Over the next week, while Marcus thought I was settling into my new role as the unsuspecting wife, I was actually orchestrating the most satisfying takedown of my life. Martinez connected me with 3 former Meridian Consulting employees who had been afraid to speak up during Marcus's time there. Now, with evidence of his continued pattern, they were ready to go on record. My FBI contact, Jessica Chen, confirmed that Marcus's digital stalking activities crossed federal lines, photographing people without consent, hacking social media accounts, and using company resources for personal surveillance all qualified as cybercrimes. The employment attorney, David Kim, was practically salivating over the evidence. This isn't just harassment, he told me. This is conspiracy, fraud, identity theft, and about 6 other felonies. Your husband's company is going to want to settle before this goes public. But we're not letting this guy walk away with a severance package. But the most important call I made was to someone Marcus would never suspect. Richard's business partner and co-founder, Thomas Bradley. Tom had sold his shares to Richard 3 years ago, but still served on the board of directors. More importantly, he was a former federal prosecutor who had specialized in white-collar crime. Richard mentioned he hired a new head of client relations, Tom said when I called him. Said the guy was almost too good to be true. That's exactly the problem. When I explained the situation, Tom was quiet for a long moment. Priya, I need you to understand something. When we expose this, it's going to devastate Richard. Not just professionally, but personally. He trusted this man, promoted him, bragged about him to clients. I know. But what's the alternative? Let Marcus destroy our marriage from the inside, while he victimizes other women? No alternative at all. I'm just making sure you're ready for the fallout. I was ready for everything except how quickly it all unraveled. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The trap was set for a Thursday morning. Marcus had scheduled a major client presentation, his biggest account, worth over $2 million annually. He'd been preparing for weeks, and Richard was planning to attend personally to show support for his star employee. What Marcus didn't know was that Tom Bradley would also be attending, along with Detective Martinez, and Agent Chen from the FBI, and David Kim with a federal warrant for Marcus's arrest. I arrived at the office early that morning, my heart hammering but my hands steady. I wore my lucky red dress, the one that made me feel invincible, and my grandmother's bangles. Today, I wasn't just Priya the victim. I was Priya the architect of justice. Marcus was already in the conference room, setting up his presentation. He looked confident, relaxed, completely unaware that his carefully constructed House of Lies was about to collapse. Big day, I said, entering with 2 cups of coffee. He looked up with surprise. Priya, I didn't expect to see you here so early. Richard asked me to observe the presentation. Learn from the master, he said. Marcus preened at the compliment. I do have a certain talent for reading people, understanding what they need to hear. Yes, you do. In fact, I've been studying your methods. Your attention to detail is extraordinary. I set his coffee down and took a seat across from him, close enough to see the micro-expressions that would give him away when the hammer fell. You, no, I continued conversationally. I was going through some of the client files last week, trying to understand your system. You keep incredibly detailed records. A flicker of something, wariness, crossed his face. Thoroughness is key in client relations. Absolutely. Though I have to say, some of your research goes above and beyond what I'd expect. Personal details, family information, behavioral patterns. It's almost like psychological profiling. Marcus's smile never wavered, but his knuckles were white where he gripped his presentation remote. The more you understand your clients, the better you can serve them. Exactly what I told Agent Chen when she asked about your methods. The coffee cup slipped from his hand, splashing across his perfectly organized notes. Agent who? FBI agent, Jessica Chen. She's very interested in your research techniques, particularly your use of company resources for personal surveillance projects. Marcus stood so quickly his chair rolled backward into the wall. I have no idea what you're talking about. Of course you don't, just like you had no idea who I was when Richard introduced us. Just like you had no idea I lived in the Meridian Towers apartment complex 2 years ago. Just like you have no idea why 3 women from your previous job filed harassment complaints. His mask was finally slipping. The charming professional facade cracked, revealing the predator underneath. You're being paranoid, Priya. Just like before. This is why we didn't work out. You see threats everywhere. The only threat I see is you. The conference room door opened, and Richard walked in with Tom Bradley and 3 people Marcus had never seen before. Morning, everyone, Richard said cheerfully. Marcus, I'd like you to meet some observers for today's presentation. This is Tom Bradley. You remember him from the board. Detective Martinez from the Metro PD. Agent Chen from the FBI. And this is David Kim, our legal counsel. I watched Marcus's face cycle through confusion, recognition, fear, and finally, rage. Pure, undiluted rage directed entirely at me. I see, he said quietly. This is quite the audience for a client presentation. Tom Bradley stepped forward with a folder thick enough to choke a horse. Actually, Marcus, we're not here for the client presentation. We're here to discuss some irregularities in your employment record and some concerning evidence that's come to our attention. What kind of evidence? Marcus's voice was steady, but sweat was beading on his forehead. Agent Chen opened her laptop and turned it toward him. On the screen was a photograph of me from 2 years ago, taken through my apartment, window with a telephoto lens. We'd like to start with this. Can you explain why this image was found on your company computer, along with detailed surveillance logs of Mrs. Henderson's activities from 2022 and 2023? Richard's face went white. What the hell is going on? Detective Martinez stepped forward. Mr. Henderson, we have evidence that Mr. Thompson has been engaged in systematic stalking and harassment of your wife for over 2 years. His employment at your company appears to be part of an elaborate scheme to regain access to his victim. That's insane, Marcus said, but his voice was shaking now. This is all some kind of misunderstanding. Priya, tell them this is crazy. All eyes turned to me. Richard looked devastated and confused. Marcus looked desperate and dangerous. The law enforcement officers looked professional and patient. I stood up slowly, smoothed my red dress, and looked Marcus directly in the eyes. 2 years ago, you made my life hell. You stalked me, harassed me, and made me afraid to exist in my own life. You disappeared for 8 months, and I thought I was free. But you weren't gone. You were planning. You researched my husband, infiltrated his company, and wormed your way into a position where you could torment me all over again. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. But here's what you didn't plan for, Marcus. You didn't plan for me to fight back. You didn't plan for me to be smarter than you thought. And you certainly didn't plan for me to become the wife of your boss. Marcus lunged toward me, but Detective Martinez was faster. He was on the ground, in handcuffs before he could take 2 steps. You psychotic bitch, he snarled from the floor. You think this is over? You think you've won? Agent Chen read him his rights, while Tom Bradley handed Richard the complete file of evidence. Page after page of surveillance photos, stolen personal information, detailed plans for psychological manipulation, and records of similar behavior at 3 previous jobs. Richard sank into a chair, staring at the photos of his wife being stalked by his most trusted employee. How long have you known? He asked me quietly. 3 weeks. I wanted to make sure we had everything before we moved. I wanted to make sure he could never do this to anyone else. David Kim stepped forward with another stack of papers. Mr. Thompson, in addition to federal charges for stalking, harassment, and cybercrimes, you're also facing fraud charges for falsifying your employment application, identity theft for using false references, and conspiracy charges for your systematic targeting of Mrs. Henderson through her husband's business. As they led Marcus away, he turned back one last time. This isn't over, Priya. People like you don't get happy endings. I smiled at him, the first genuine smile I'd managed in his presence. People like me write our own endings. And in this story, the monster gets exactly what he deserves. The aftermath was swift and decisive. Marcus pled guilty to avoid a lengthy trial and received 8 years in federal prison. The 3 women from Meridian Consulting filed a civil suit that resulted in a 7-figure settlement. Henderson Tech Solutions implemented new background check procedures and hired a security consultant to review all personnel files. Richard and I went to counseling to work through the betrayal and trauma, but our marriage emerged stronger. He sold the company 6 months later, and we moved to Portland, where he started a nonprofit helping small businesses with technology integration. I never saw Marcus again, but I heard through Detective Martinez that he was transferred to a maximum security facility after attempting to bribe a guard to smuggle out letters addressed to me. Some people never learn. But I learned something important through all of this. Victims don't have to stay victims. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's getting justice. It's making sure the predator can never hurt anyone else. It's taking back your power and using it to protect others. Marcus thought he was the spider, and I was the fly caught in his web. He never realized that some flies grow fangs, and sometimes the spider becomes the prey. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.